All right, today we're going to talk about something really powerful. It's an ancient practice for making decisions together as a real community. It's called communal discernment. And honestly, in a world that feels so fractured and just loud, this idea of listening together might be more important than ever.
I mean, just think about it for a second. Every single day, we are just bombarded with opinions, pressures, and endless distractions. It doesn't matter if it's at work, with our families, or in our community groups. Trying to find clarity and just make the right choice together can feel, well, next to impossible. So how do you do it? How do we cut through all that noise to actually find the best path forward?
So, to figure out that new way forward, let's first take a look at why our usual ways of making group decisions so often just fall flat.
It's definitely no secret that our world feels more divided every day. The source material for this really points out that things like selfishness and conflict seem to be on the rise, and they're creating these huge challenges that our old ways of thinking just can't solve. We really need a model that brings people together, not one that just keeps pushing them further apart.
You know, I actually learned something pretty interesting while prepping for this. There's a term for this reality, VUCA. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And what that really means is that our problems are all tangled up together and they're constantly shifting. Simple, top-down decisions, they usually fail because they just can't keep up with all this complexity. A single person's perspective just isn't enough anymore.
So, what is all this pointing to? Well, it feels like we're being called to something different, something countercultural. It's about shifting from division to unity, from arguing our points to actually listening to each other. It's about seeing our life together as a shared journey.
And that shared journey has a name, and it's really the heart of what we're talking about today. So what is communal discernment? Let's break down what this practice is, and maybe just as importantly, what it is not.
Okay, I love this slide because the contrast is so stark. Think about a standard meeting. It's often like a battlefield of ideas, right? The goal is to make sure your idea wins. Well, communal discernment completely flips the script. The goal isn't for me to win, it's for us to discover something together. The method isn't debate, it's deep, prayerful listening. And the outcome? You go from having winners and losers to having a whole, unified community moving forward on a shared path. It's a huge shift.
So here it is, a clear definition. This is a spiritual process. That's key. It's about a group actively looking for divine guidance, not just trying to figure it out with their own human wisdom. And you see the two main actions right there, listening to the Holy Spirit and just as critically, listening to one another. And this is such a vital point. This whole thing isn't just some clever management technique or a new meeting format. It's actually rooted in faith. It assumes there's a real relationship with God, and it trusts that guidance is a gift we can receive, not some conclusion we have to force. It's really less about our own intellect and way more about our spiritual openness.
Okay, so we've got the what and the why, but how does this actually work? In a real meeting with real people. Well, this next part gives us a practical framework for how to actually listen together.
Here are the 4 core steps. First, you prepare. You create a prayerful space and you really try to let go of your own agendas. Second, when it's your turn to speak, you share honestly from your own experience, not trying to dominate the conversation. Third, and this is huge, you listen with genuine humility, even to ideas that you totally disagree with. And finally, you actually use silence. You take time to reflect and just notice where a deeper wisdom, where the Spirit might be leading the group.
The source material uses this incredible metaphor for that first step of opening our hearts. It says it's like we're being called out of a cave. The dark, familiar cave of our own biases, our fears, and all our fixed ideas about how things should go. It's only by stepping out of that cave and into the open that we can truly see and hear something new.
And this idea of stepping out leads us to what might be the most crucial part of this whole process. Once we're actually listening, who are we supposed to be listening to? The answer might surprise you.
This ancient quote comes from the story of the prophet Elijah, and it's really the central analogy for what true discernment is all about. So Elijah is waiting to hear from God, and first there's this powerful wind, then a terrifying earthquake, and then a raging fire. But God isn't in any of those loud, dramatic, powerful events. God's voice comes in a gentle whisper.
So, in our own meetings, the wind, the earthquake, and the fire, that's the noise. These are the voices that usually dominate, right? The voice of political influence, of money and prestige, the voice of ego and pride, the voice of fear, which is always pushing for the safest, most predictable option, and sometimes it's just the loudest opinion in the room.
But the argument here is that divine guidance, that gentle whisper, is often found somewhere else entirely. It's heard in the voices of the poor, the oppressed, the marginalized. It comes from the people who are so often overlooked in our communities. The crucial insight is that real wisdom doesn't always come from the center of power. A lot of the time, it comes from the margins.
And this brings us to what is basically a non-negotiable principle of this entire process. For a decision to be truly faithful and complete, it has to intentionally seek out and include these quiet voices. It actually becomes the group's sacred duty to make sure that the gentle whisper isn't just heard, but is amplified for everyone. So as we start to wrap this up, it's so important to see this as more than just a one-time trick for making a tough choice. This is a transformative way of being a community. It's a journey of hope.
A huge part of this journey is trust. See, the goal isn't to get everybody to finally agree on our plan. It's about staying open to the incredible possibility that a much bigger, much better plan exists, one that's way beyond our own limited imaginations. It's a great reminder that sometimes what we think we need isn't nearly as amazing as what's actually in store.
And that, right there, is the ultimate takeaway. Communal discernment is so much more than a meeting strategy. By practicing this kind of deep, humble listening, a group doesn't just make better decisions, it actually becomes a stronger, more connected, more inclusive community along the way. It literally transforms relationships.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought to take with you. In your own community, your team, or your family, who are the overlooked voices? What is the quiet, essential truth that might be getting completely drowned out by all the noise? What's the gentle whisper that your community really needs to hear right now?